Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Aletha of Ribbons and Zippers. If you are new here, I am so glad that you stopped by. Today I am going to show you some tips and techniques on how to add a sophisticated and elegant look to your garment creation. And that's simply by adding a built-up neckline. I know you've heard of that. I'm sure you're going to love what you learned today, so go ahead and hit the subscribe button below and don't go anywhere because we're definitely going to learn a lot. Okay, so now that the weather is getting a little bit more colder, it's the perfect time to jump into making clothes that are more fall and winter-like, such as jackets and coats and even turtlenecks. Honestly, I am not a fan of turtlenecks. I find them to be a bit tight and constricted and too much around the neck. But what I do love is a built-up neckline. So today I'm going to show you just how to design a few different types of this particular design element. As you know, when you draft your bodice sloper and cut out a pattern, you're always going to find that the neck is right about here when you try on the mock-up, right? Right about here. So what do? Normally when we think about elegance, we always style down, right? Meaning we lower the neckline. Normally below the collarbone. We widen it and sometimes we plunge the neckline as low as we can get it, right? So when we think of elegance, we normally don't think of styling up. But today we're going to learn about how we can change that thought. So grab your pattern paper, grab some pencils, markers, tape, and scissors. And I'm going to show you how to draft 3 different types of the built-up neckline. The first is what I call a funnel neck or a mock neck. It basically looks something like this. I prefer to draft it as high as above the collarbone to around the middle of the neck. And it's designed with added fullness so that it falls away from the neck. Okay, so I started by tracing my front and back bodice sloper, and I'm going to begin with the funnel neck or the mock neck pattern to create a built-up neckline. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make some marks at the top of the neckline. So this is my front bodice and this is my back bodice. And the first thing that I want to do, I want to measure from my neck along the shoulder, and I am going to measure in about 1/2 of an inch from my neckline. Then right along the center front, I'm going to measure down 2 inches and I'm going to make a mark. And then go ahead and take a ruler, a curved ruler preferably, and we're going to make a curve from the 1/2 of an inch to the 2 inch mark. Okay, so I have a curved line 1/2 of an inch from my neckline and 2 inches down from the neck. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my bodice front out, and you're going to need to have more paper. Okay, so I cut my bodice out from the paper, and I now want to cut this piece that I made at the neck, but I'm going to cut it all the way up to the edge of the shoulder, but I don't want to cut through. So I'm just going to take another piece of paper and put under. So this is just a little bit of paper that I had left over, so let's go ahead and cut this, and I'm going to move it. Make sure you do not cut through. And if you want, you could put a little bit of tape there so that you know that you're not ripping it. And I'll show you. Okay, so I'm going to slash the line that I drew from the center front all the way to my shoulder. And I don't want to cut it off. I only want to cut to the shoulder, but don't cut through. And what I could do is I can add a little bit of Scotch tape, which is something I like to do to reinforce that edge. And you can use scissors if you'd like, or you can use a rotary cutter. Just move your paper out of the way and then just use your rotary cutter to cut that line. So now we have this portion that we're going to move. Okay, now you're going to put a piece of paper underneath. This is the scrap paper that I cut off, so don't waste it, just use it. Okay, and I am going to move my slashed piece so that I have a 2-inch wide gap here. Alright, so let me go ahead and grab my ruler. Okay, just measure it, make sure it's 2 inches. So from here to here is 2 inches, right? Flatten everything, tape it down, make sure it's nice and flat. Okay, so here we have it. All right, zoomed in for you just a little bit so that you can see. So from here to here is 2 inches. I made a curve along the neckline, a 1/2 inch from the neck along the shoulder, down on the center front, and then I cut to but not through, and then I moved it up 2 inches and taped it down. And this is what we have. Okay, so now, as you can see, this line goes up. So it's going to basically go up along the neck. So I want my line to continue to go up 1.5 inches, okay? Where I cut to but not through, let's go ahead and mark that line again. Okay? So from that point, I'm going to square 1.5 inches up, and then I'm going to square down. So we're going to go 1.5 inches along the line from that point and down. 1/2 inch down, as long as it's square. Okay? Let me zoom in so you can see. Okay, so from my mid shoulder to the tip of my square, I'm going to curve a line because I want it to be smooth. No sharp edges. No sharp edges. Okay? Now also from my square point to the tip of my center front neckline, which now we moved up, right? I want to also curve. So let's make a curve here. Okay, that looks good. Now I want to curve another line to this point, the 2 inches that I came down. Remember? I am going to curve a line here. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is where you can use your design thinking. You can leave it just the way it is once you make this curved line. Okay? You can leave it like this. Now, remember, this is the center front. Depending on your design, and this would be your fold. So you ask yourself, how can I put this on a fold if I have this curve coming out? It just won't work. You see? It won't work. So what do? Let's cut this out and I'll show you how you could fix that. Okay, so I cut out my pattern. You can leave it just like this, and depending on what you want to do, you can use this pattern with an opening in the front. So then in that case you would add your seam allowance and close it up with a zipper. You can even just make a seam. But if you wanted it to be one piece in the front and one piece in the back, you need to be able to place it on the fold. So the only thing that you can do is make a straight line from the waist to the neck. And in that case, you're going to create room here in the neck, which is perfectly fine. It actually looks really good when you have this room at the neck area. So what do? You go ahead, and this is one option. You use your pattern paper and you create two options. So in this case, what would you do? You create the option to lay your pattern on the fold by just adding a straight line onto your pattern. So it's just a design element. Okay, so this is the front. And then I would say that this is a funnel neck, or it could be a mock neck. Funnel neck, mock neck design. All right. And of course you will cut all of this out, and that is your pattern. You're going to add your 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can lower your armhole, close up your waist if you'd like, however you want to do it. But we're only concentrating on how to make a built-up neckline for a funnel neck or a mock neck. Okay, and now let's do the back. So the back is very, very simple. Remember, we raised our neck 1.5 inches on the front. So we want to do the same thing for the back. First, before I do anything, just like I did the front, I'm going to cut out my pattern. Alright guys, so here's my back, and I'm going to do similar to what I did on the front. So from my neck point, I'm going to measure over 1/2 of an inch, and I'm going to make a mark along the shoulder line. So right about here. Here's my 1/2 inch mark. So now what I want to do, remember I went up 1.5 inches along that point. Now I don't have to cut or slash anything on the back. I just need to make it match. So your shoulders need to match, and the height of the neck, the funnel neck or the mock neck, need to match. So what did we do? 1.5 inches from this point. So we need to do the same thing. But first, I want to square a line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and grab another ruler. If you give me one moment. Bear with me. I am just sometimes anal about these things, or I just want to make sure that I have a really perfect line. It doesn't have to be all the way down. It just has to be right there. Okay? Sorry about that. Okay, so you just need a line that is squared up. All it is a guideline. It just needs to go up, okay? And it just needs to be parallel to the center back. So here's my 1/2 inch mark along the shoulder, okay? Also too, from my center back, I'm going to make a line that is 1 inch from the back neckline. Just 1 inch high, that's all. And square over. So again, got to make sure that that's squared, okay? So from our 1/2 inch on our shoulder line, we're going to measure up 1.5 inches. That's why we have the guideline, so that we can have something to reference. Okay? So now that you have your 1.5 inch line, again, we don't want anything to be wonky, so we just are going to square that line. Okay, square that line there, 1.5 inches, square over. Okay, so now you're going to close it up with the curved ruler. All right, so now we don't want this sharp dent in our neck, so we have to make a curve, clean it up, so to speak. Okay, so again, we're going to cut this out so that it's a pattern. Add your 1/2 inch seam allowances, and there you have it. Okay, you'll need to create a facing. So let me grab some paper here. Take your pattern paper for your facing, fold it in half. All right, so when you fold it in half, you can do 2 things. I'm going to try to be able to see through, but you can place it on the fold for your bodice, if your bodice is going to go on a fold, and you can also place it on your neck that curves. Remember, we still have our little mark that's a 1/2 inch over on the shoulder, and then we still have our pattern that we moved up. You can still see it, so that I can go down 1 inch. I can still see through my paper. Okay, so that's 1 inch, and 1 inch on my mark that I made on my shoulder. 1 inch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and trace my pattern. That's the facing. This is the facing for the funnel neck that is not on the fold. You can cut here and add a 1/2 inch seam allowance. This could be cut 2 facing. Okay. On the other hand, the facing that is on the fold, I'm going to do the same exact thing, but this one is going to be on the fold. So we would find our mark, which is here on the shoulder, and we would go down 1 inch along the shoulder, and then again 1 inch from the bottom of the facing. Okay, then we would trace cut 1 on fold. All right, so here we have it. This is our facings. Facing, fold, cut 2, add your seam allowances. Okay, so you're going to add your seam allowances, cut 2, cut 1, add seam allowances, cut on fold. And you're going to do the same exact thing for the facing for the back. The facing for the back, you're going to fold your tracing paper. You're going to locate your 1/2 inch mark, which is right here. You're going to come down 1 inch and you're going to trace around your neck. Okay, we're going to start by tracing off our front and our back bodice onto pattern paper. And just as before with our other pattern, we want to cut out our pattern. It makes it easier to work with. And then grab some extra pattern paper so you can use to fill in the empty spaces that we're going to create. All right. Okay, so here's my bodice front block and back block. I've cut them out. Okay, so I'm going to start with the front bodice. So this is a very, very simple draft. It's, again, the Bateau neck. What we want to do is raise the neckline. Remember, we're going to raise the neckline up, and we're going to move it over. So up and over. Very simple. So the point is, you want to figure out how much of a boat neck that you want, and you could raise it up 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then the point is to start from the mid shoulder. Measure your shoulder, which mine is 5 inches, and the mid shoulder would be 2.5 inches. Okay. So I'm going to need to make a mark at the 2.5 inches. I have a mark there which should be 2.5 inches, but apparently it's not. So I'm going to make a new mark, 2.5 inches. Okay, so what we want to do is we are going to close up this dart, the waist dart, just a little bit by creating a line, a slash line or a dart line. We're going to make another dart to the mid neck. So from my bust point to my neck, I'm going to create another line, and that's going to be a slash line. All right. So once we have our line, we want to cut to but not through. Okay, so now I have my bodice where I could manipulate my dart. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure about 1/2 inch to 1 inch, and everybody's preference is different. So me, personally, I'm going to go with 3/4 inch. So what I'm just using a little bit of scrap paper that I had left. I just slipped it under, and I'm just going to tape it down. Just want to make sure that I stay at the measurement that I wanted, and that's 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch. The preference is yours. And just go ahead and tape. So I'm just going to cut this away and grab another piece of paper, because I'm going to need to now extend my center front neck up, and from my mid shoulder extend up and over, and we're going to create a new boat neckline. Okay, so tape it down so that it won't move. Take your ruler and measure up. Make sure your ruler is squared straight down on your center front, and we're going to measure up 3/4 inch and square it. Okay, so we're going to square for about 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch up and over. You see how I did that? I used the edge of my ruler to make sure I have a nice square. So we're going to go up 3/4 inch and over a little more than 1/2 inch. And there you have your square. Let me zoom in so you can see. Okay, next, let's go over here to our mid shoulder. All right. So at our mid shoulder, we want to measure up 1.5 inches, but it's not going to go straight up, right? It's going to be our neckline, a boat neckline. So we have to make sure that it goes over a little bit, but where are we going to stop? We want to angle it so that it's 1.5 inches away from the shoulder and 3/4 of an inches down, okay? Nice and square. So again, we could use our handy dandy ruler that is already square. So from the center of our shoulder, we want to find the 1.5 inch mark, and then we're going to pivot the ruler until we are at the 3/4 of an inch on your ruler. Okay, so I have 1.5 inches and 3/4 of an inch. Okay, and then you can just go ahead and square that off. All right, so now what we need to do is just blend our new boat neck line. Okay, very simple, very easy to do. Okay, also remember, we don't want to have a sharp edge here. So this is a sharp edge, so go ahead and blend your neckline here so that it's not sharp. All right. Okay, so here you have it. Okay, we're going to cut this out, and in the same manner that you did for our previous pattern, we need to make a facing. Okay, and the facing is done exactly the same way. So again, grab some pattern paper, fold your pattern paper in half, put your pattern paper on the fold, find the halfway mark of our shoulder, half our shoulder, that's the notch, and then you would just go ahead and trace. So you will come down 1 inch, or go over 1 inch from that mark, and just follow your pattern. So here's my notch, here's 1 inch over, and then you just go ahead and follow your new Bateau neckline. Okay, so this is your facing. This would be the fold if you want to do a fold. Okay, or you can extend it for your 5/8 inch or your 1/2 inch mark. You're going to make sure that you put your seam allowances all the way around, and this is your facing. Okay, so when you cut it out and you open it, that'll be your facing, or you can lay it out on another piece of paper and create your 1/2 inch seam allowance or your 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. Same thing for the bodice, the front bodice for a Bateau neck. You are going to create your seam allowances all the way around. And this is just the neck design. You can do whatever you want with the rest of the bodice front. You can make pleats, you can make gathers, you can lower the armhole. The point is, now you know how to make the Bateau neckline. That's the front. Let's go ahead and move to the back. Very, very simple as well. Okay, so here's my back. I am going to make an opening to the tip of my waist dart in the back. I'm just going to draw a line. All right, this is going to be my slash line. I'm going to cut to, but not through. That way I can close up my dart. We're going to make sure that it is 5 inches, which it is. And then we are going to go ahead and make our midway point. I'm going to tape it so it stays down. My 2.5 inch mark is here. Okay, so This one is really simple, very simple. Let's grab some paper. From my mark, my mid-shoulder point, I want to go up 1.5 inches, but we want to angle our ruler so that we come down to 3/4 of an inch, and then we're going to square that off. I'm just taping down the very tip just so it doesn't move. So again, mid-shoulder, get your ruler, find 1.5 inches on your ruler, place the 1.5 inches at the mid-shoulder mark that you made, angle your ruler. You see, we're going to angle our ruler so that it comes down 3/4 of an inch on our shoulder, and then go ahead and trace off your square. All right. Okay, so let me show you. So here's my halfway mark, half my shoulder, okay, and then 1.5 inch up and down 3/4 of an inch. Now that's going to match my front. So once I have it, what I need to do is just go ahead and just smooth this out. We're going to smooth it out towards the center back. Okay, so let me just go ahead and grab my ruler, and I'm going to just smooth it out. Okay, so there we have it. That's all that you have to do for your back bateau neck. Okay, before you cut it out, we want to address this sharp edge right here. We don't want that to be sharp. It just is not a good thing for when you're sewing. So go ahead and take your front bodice. So go ahead and put one on top of the other and get your marker and trace. So that's exactly what we want. A nice curve. And it matches our front bodice. Just going to put a little bit of tape because the marker that I'm using smears. Okay, so that's perfect. Now you're going to cut it out, and you're going to make a facing for the back exactly like you did the front. You're going to come down an inch from your midway shoulder point, and you're going to make a nice facing. Okay, so we cut this out. Don't forget to transfer all of your notches, add your seam allowances. If this is going to be a stretch fabric, you can add seam lines. Even if it is stretch, I've done it where it's stretch fabric and I still put buttons in the back. The design choice is yours. Okay, so here you have it, and that is the Bateau neckline pattern. All right, don't forget your facing. Okay everyone, thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed part 1 of how to create a built-up neckline. In this part, we learned 2 awesome variations, which leads us to part 2, which is the raised cow neck. And I know you're going to enjoy that one. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed today's tips and techniques. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so that you can be reminded every time I do a video that's just for you. I'll see you in the next video.